evening and welcome to Together Mississauga, our city, our voice, a mayoral debate. I'm Phil Perkins. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday night. Tonight's debate, hosted by United Way Greater Toronto, and is appropriately being held at the Hazen McCallion campus of Sheridan College, right by Mississauga City Hall. Now here's a live look right now at tonight's setup. The debate will begin momentarily. 5 candidates will be taking part: Brian Crombie, Dipika Damerla, Dasko, George Tavares, and Alvin Tedjo. Now, Crombie is currently the Chief Operating Officer at real estate development company TerraCap. He's also the ex-husband of former Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie. Damerla is a Mississauga City Council right now, representing Ward 7. Dasko is a councillor representing Ward 1. Tavares is a community advocate who includes engineering and political science as part of his background, and Tedjo is the current councillor for Ward 2. Now, not taking part today is perceived frontrunner Carolyn Parrish, who previously announced that she would not be participating in any debates ahead of the election.
It's horrible.
Now, a new liaison strategies poll released earlier this week suggests the race is tightening as we get closer to election day, with Parrish still leading at 25% support. Damerla closing the gap at 20%. Now, Tedjo is in third at 16%. Stephen Dasko has 10% support. That's followed by Crombie with 8%. Now, this new poll found 8% of respondents are voting for someone else, with 16% undecided. The poll was conducted on May 24th and 25th, with 907 residents surveyed. It has a margin of error of plus or minus 3.22%, 19 times out of 20. All right, we're going to go to the debate right now with the 5 candidates, and so enjoy it. We'll be right back.
Seth, I'm a journalist with over 25 years of experience. I'm a storyteller. I have covered elections at all levels throughout my career, and I will be your moderator this evening. Candidates, welcome. I, of course, would like to thank all of you for joining us here in person, of course, those that are watching on television as well or online, and especially, as I mentioned, the mayoral candidates who are before you today who've chosen to join in this debate tonight. Now, as we know, Mississauga turns 50 this year. It's hard not to notice that it is not the same Mississauga as it was 50 years ago. This is a city experiencing incredible growth. The city's demographics are changing. It's bigger, more diverse, more urban, more modern, denser, and taller. It's also a city facing many critical issues, from a growing affordable housing crisis, strained community services, etc. There are 20 candidates we know in this election that are vying to be mayor, and far more than we could fit on this stage, and of course that we have time. However, as we know, we've got 5 candidates who are here today. Now, to make the debate manageable, we've used an average of polls in a predetermined period to select candidates polling at 5% based in voting intention. On that basis, we invited 6 candidates. 5 of them, as you see before you, have accepted that invitation, and they are in the order as determined by a random draw we did earlier this evening. So before me right now is Dipika Damerla, Alvin Tedjo, Stephen Dasko, Brian Crombie, and George Tavares. Now, candidate Carolyn Parrish was invited. However, she did decline to participate in tonight's debate. Now, these candidates here before you will field questions coming from me as well as from members of the community, with each candidate having 1 minute to respond. There's also going to be a segment during this debate in which each candidate will have an opportunity to have a direct question to one of their opponents, creating space for one-on-one engagement. And the candidates have agreed to the format in advance of the debate, and of course, they know the rules. We want to keep it engaging, but we want to keep it clean. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that we're here, of course, to hear the candidates who are here campaigning for mayor. Hearing them out without disruption or interruption, and to hold applause until all candidates have spoken. We know that the candidates, of course, have participated in a number of debates. They've introduced yourselves right across the city. Tonight's debate is critical. We know that there's another debate tomorrow, and then, of course, voters, if they haven't already, they're heading to the polls. Advanced polling happening this weekend, and, of course, Election Day is on June 10th. Candidates, are we ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, we got the thumbs up. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin tonight's debate. Let's begin with the first theme here, qualifications to lead Mississauga into the future. And I begin with our first candidate here, Dipika Damerla. The question to you is, why are you the right candidate to lead our modern, diverse urban city into its future? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Experience matters. And I've run a small business in this city. I worked in corporate banking. I've served as a member of provincial parliament, had the honor of serving as a cabinet minister in Ontario and as a city councillor. And all of this has prepared me for today, to lead Mississauga and be the mayor Mississauga needs. I'm running to tackle crime and keep our property taxes affordable. My commitment is a hard no to any new class of taxes. This is in contrast to Carolyn Parrish, who's mused many times about bringing in a new municipal land transfer tax. And yes, we must build more homes, but that's not enough. We have to build neighborhoods, and we need to manage the coming growth. As mayor, I'm going to suggest something really radical. I'll bring a practical approach and lean into new ideas to ensure our city remains livable and affordable even as we grow. Thank you.
All right. Alvin, the same question to you.
Thank you, Angie. I'm so excited to be here today. I grew up in this neighborhood. Without the building behind us, you could see my home, the childhood home I lived in and grew up in, and spent a lot of time here in this neighborhood around Square One. I was proud to be an employee at Sheridan College here for 5 years. Thank you, Dr. Morrison, for everything that you've done for this community, because this is our community. And I've spent years working in post-secondary education after I left Sheridan, worked for Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan University, and at the Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities. But the entire time, I've always been an advocate for families, been an advocate for people, been an advocate for students, to make sure that we have a livable community, that we have the best access to education, that we have everything that we need to succeed as a community. And I've been fighting for that. And I've been fighting for our neighbors and our family and our friends to make sure that we have the most affordable city and the most livable city in Canada. And I am so excited about this debate and having this discussion about how we're going to do that. Thank you so much.
Alvin, thank you. Stephen, same question over to you.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Angie. I'm passionate about our city. I'm not a career politician. I ran first in 2018. I received 45% of the popular vote, ran again in 2022, and I received over 70%. I only say that because I work hard for everybody and I get results. I'm one that has a background in business, and at the same time, I take a common sense approach to solving problems and to building things. I have a proven track record of getting things done, and one of the big things that I do is I listen. I think that's one of the most important qualities that we could have in somebody that's going to lead us forward as a city of Mississauga. And as well, having a vision forward for what we're going to be. We know where we've been for 50 years. It's where we're going for the next 50 years. This is our opportunity. This is our time right now. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. Brian, question over to you.
What have we heard already tonight? We've heard a housing crisis, metamorphosis, social service problems of funding, congestion. All we've heard is a bunch of negative things so far about what's happening in Mississauga. So the answer to your question is, I'm not a current city councillor. Because in any other world, given what has already been described, you wouldn't be promoting someone to the senior job if they've shepherded over the disaster that we've got right now. And you know it's a problem. We have got taxes that are going up 3 times inflation. You need a business person to get in and understand what's going on, and they're misrepresenting what those tax increases are. We have got a housing affordability crisis. There's going to be 1 million people that aren't going to be able to afford a home in the next 10 years in the Greater Toronto Area. It's a disaster waiting to happen. I've got 40 years of business experience. I'm the chief operating officer for a $2.5 billion real estate development company. I have been chairman of the Mississauga City Summit with Carol over there being my #2 wonderful person. My co-chair was with the United Way. I've been president of Mississauga Arts Council. I've got the civic involvement, I got the business involvement, and I'm not on city council today, which I think is a problem.
All right, Brian, your time's up. Thank you for that. George?
Hello, everybody. And how do you do that? That's amazing. So anyways, my name is George Tavares. Clearly, you've never met me. You don't know who I am. I, of course, am not on council. But I have worked with every level of government in Canada, the U.S., and worldwide. And I'm the person that is brought in to fix multi-million-dollar projects on the brink of failure, and I meant to fix it. So, do you like our council? Do you like the city of Mississauga? Do you like the high taxes, the crime? Because I can tell you right now, in the world of business, if you want change, you can't hire within and expect positive results. It doesn't happen. You need change. So, I'm going to be really short, but if you can jump online, take a look at my website at tavaresformayor.ca. I've got a lot of ideas, some fresh ideas, some new ideas. I'd like you to just give me a quick look. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, candidates. One quick reminder to our audience, if you do have your cell phones with you, which I'm assuming you do, please put them on silent and turn them off. I did hear a ding earlier. We want to make sure that there are no interruptions during the debate. All right, so a lot we heard at an opening here from the candidates, but of course, what is so critical are you, the people, the residents, and the voters, of course, and engaging their participation in what's happening in the city, and of course, what's happening in this election. So, Dipika, over to you. Here's my question. Engaging residents in policy development and decision-making empowers citizens to play an active role in shaping their communities and societies and builds trust and collaboration between government and institutions and the public. In the 2023 Mississauga Satisfaction Survey, only 47% were satisfied with the city's engagement of residents in important issues. In the last municipal election, voter turnout was only 21.84%. As an increasingly diverse and multicultural city, what are your plans to lean into that strength and to meaningfully engage residents in building a vibrant and engaged city where people have access to good jobs, housing, feel safe, connected, and belong? And what are you doing in this election to encourage people to head to the polls on June 10th? And that also includes youth and first-time voters.
Wow.
All in 1 minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
You know, I'm very encouraged by the advance vote turnout. It's been significantly higher. That said, I think people often don't vote or don't get engaged because they feel their voices don't matter. I'm going to give you 2 examples recently from Mississauga. The first one is Bloor Street. You know, I've been knocking on doors, and there's a real sense that their voice is not heard. There's a real concern that there's going to be congestion. And there's a real sense that City Hall just didn't hear them. And they're perplexed because what they're saying is there is a way to keep the 4 car lanes and accommodate the bike lanes. When that option is there, why are we taking car lanes away? Why is City Hall not listening? There's a real sense of being silenced and being voiceless. I'll give you another example. There was an attempt to rush the 4-plex decision across Mississauga. Now, this is a big change. Good or bad, you need to consult with people. But there was this desire to just rush it through and say no to consultation.
Okay.
That's the problem. That needs to be fixed.
That's your time. Thank you. I'm going to repeat the question for the rest of the candidates as well, just so that there's a refresher. What are your plans to lean into the strength and to meaningfully engage residents in building a vibrant and engaged city where people have access to good jobs, housing, feel safe and connected and belong? And what are you doing in this election to encourage people to head to the polls on June 10th? And I'm also talking about first-time voters and youth. Alvin.
Absolutely. We need to be engaging the current generation of people who cannot find a home to live in this city. We need to give people reasons to vote, give them hope that there's a chance that they could live in this city. My parents came here when I was 4 years old, and they came here because they saw an opportunity to start a business, to get an education, and to afford to buy a home. My wife and I chose Mississauga for the same reason. And we raised 3 beautiful kids that are 9, 11, and 13 years old. And right now, I can't imagine a world where in 10 years, when they're hopefully moving out, where there's going to be a place for them in this city. There isn't a place for so many people already in this city who are losing hope. My brother and sister are almost 10 years younger than me, and they're in their 30s, and they still live with my parents. And they're good professionals, and there are so many professionals in this city that don't have that chance to buy affordable housing, to rent affordable housing in this city. So we need to be doing much more. We need to do everything that we can. We need a different stream for purpose-built rental. We need a different stream for affordable housing. We need to do everything we can to cut the red tape and speed up those approvals and give these young people a reason to vote.
Stephen, over to you.
Well, for me, I don't have to wait for an election to consult and activate what I think is voter participation. I do that on a daily basis. I always go out, and so far to date, as a city councillor, I've had over 500 community consultation meetings because everybody's voice matters. That's the same approach I'm going to be taking as the next mayor of Mississauga. That public engagement is so important, not just as an election promise or not just at an election time. You've got to do that each and every day. And this is something that's my style. It's to consult everybody and to make sure that that 47% number is double that of what it should be right now, because everybody's vote matters, and this is the most important election that the city will face because it's a significant turning point in our history. We know where we've been for the past 50, it's where we're going for the next 50, and this is our time. So I urge everyone to get out and please vote. It's so important.
All right, Stephen, thank you. Brian, over to you. Same question.
Let's admit it. When we have a 21% turnout, and statistics suggest that's 5% turnout for people under the age of 30, maybe over 30% for older people, the people in Mississauga are voting with their feet. They don't think we have a functioning municipal democracy today. People up front, and even Stephen just said, we want to hear every voice. The truth is, the people of Mississauga don't want to hear every voice. I've been excluded from 4 debates. Tomorrow the CBC is excluding me. Our national publicly funded media is excluding me from a 5th debate tomorrow. Thank you for including George and I today. I'm at, according to a poll that came out 2 days ago, at 9%. I'm within the margin of error of the person that's in 4th place. But CBC doesn't think that you have a right to hear what I have to say. So what am I doing? I'm going to argue that we need to hear everyone's voice. We need to think about our democracy. We need to realize that people are not being heard, and they want to be heard. And if all you do is elect the elite over and over and over again, the gatekeepers will not allow you to have your voice heard.
All right. Thank you for that, Brian. George?
So I'm a big fan of the 2-term limit, if you haven't heard that before, or offsetting the election. And right now is the perfect opportunity. Because we have, in 2 years, we're having another election, and I would love to see it, because if we did it an offset by 2 years, you'd have 2 years for the council, 2 years for mayor, and then everybody will be heard. So that's one of the opportunities that I think we're missing out on. I think one of the problems that we have is council is always at one location. I would love to see them move. I'd like to see them move to every ward, have one meeting in every other ward just to make sure that their communities can be heard, so you can see what's really happening. And let's face it, when you're at council, when you're sitting at City Hall, they're elevated. They're this high. Everybody else is really low. It's intimidating for most people. So I don't think anybody gets a real chance to speak when they need to. The other thing I think we're missing out on is, I think when we're doing the deputations, I think Sheridan College should be using their abilities to pre-record all of it, so to give everybody that are too afraid.
George, your time's up.
My apologies. Thank you.
And I just want to remind the candidates again, you do have a minute. I will keep you to time so we can get through this debate. I want to shift over now to another issue that is big, of course, in the city. We're talking about support for an adequate investment in community services. This is a city that is bustling and services are needed. So part of an affordable, livable city is not just what things cost, but the amenities as well as the services that are available to all residents. A study released last week highlighted that Mississauga receives hundreds of millions of dollars less in provincial social service funding compared to similar municipalities, and is last in funding compared to all major cities in the province. So my question to you is, how will you work with the provincial government to ensure Mississauga receives the appropriate resources needed to make sure all people in the city can access the services they need? Dipika, we'll start with you.
So I have a question for the audience. How many of you knew this? That Peel is underfunded to the tune of $570 per capita. 4 or 5 hands. And that's in a very engaged crowd. I bet you if you went outside, it would be, just general population, it would be a lot less. But how many of you know this, that because we are underfunded, but as a region we want to do the right thing, we top up, not fully, at the margins, we top up social funding, and that goes on your property tax. How many of you know this? Just the people from Metamorphosis. And so that's the point, right? The awareness isn't there. This has been an issue since I first got elected in 2011. It hasn't changed. And it hasn't changed because the public isn't aware. We can keep writing letters to Queen's Park and have one-on-one meetings with the minister. But if we want real change, we need the public on our side. That's why I brought forward a motion that would put on the property tax and make it transparent what portion of it is paying for. Okay, well, we'll have to come back and answer it, but just it gives you a flavor of where I'm going and what kind of.
All right, I'm going to send it over to Alvin now.
Absolutely, we are completely underfunded when it comes to the social services that the province has downloaded onto the region and onto municipalities. That's unacceptable. Having the increase go by inflation, as was recently announced, is a good small step forward. But when the base of that funding is inadequate, when you're talking about $700 a month for someone on Ontario Works, and you're talking about a world where rental right now is $2,200 for a one bedroom, there is no scenario where we don't need to do much, much more to help people. Now, we can obviously advocate, and we will continue to do that, and we will push as hard as we can, but we also need to fill the gap. We also need to step up where we can, because we can't just let these people suffer. And so I was proud that I was able to introduce a food banks motion that got us millions of dollars more to the food bank. And we were able to introduce more shelters to help the people where we have 400% capacity in terms of our shelter system. And so that's the kind of work that I want to continue doing to make sure that we're doing our part while continuing to push the province.
All right, thank you. Stephen, over to you.
I think the common theme is we're not getting our fair share. And this has gone on. It's not the latest report that came out from Metamorphosis. That just turned the light bulb on from what we really knew from back in the 90s up to now. This started off with fair share for Peel. And quite frankly, we need fair share for not just Peel, but also for Mississauga. Mississauga, for every dollar that you're paying in taxes, 35 cents actually stays in Mississauga. The rest goes off to the region and also to our school boards. These formulas are antiquated, they're old. We need to keep up with current times right now and think differently as well. Areas like Hamilton are coming up for some of their housing needs with community bonds. These are things that we should be looking at. We should also look to the federal government to provide some grants for truly affordable housing. And this is coming from somebody that's representing a ward that's actually building more truly affordable housing than anywhere else in Peel right now. And we need to step up.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Brian, over to you.
$868 million in less funding than the median of other major urban centers in Ontario. We are dead last in urban centers, according to Metamorphosis in the report last year. Has our council been doing the job? You've got to ask yourself that. At some point in time, you're going to have to wake up and say, these people that we're electing over and over again, are they actually doing the job that we want? Carolyn Parrish, who's leading in the polls, has been on council for, what is it, 25 years? If she can't get it done in that length of time, why are you going to promote her? Councillor Damerla said it was the same when she got elected. She's run provincially twice, she's run municipally twice, she's now running for mayor. She hasn't got it done. That's the answer. You need someone that's going to get it done, someone that's going to go to Queen's Park and demand a fair share, not ask nicely for a share. Asking nicely doesn't work. We could have the same conversation on transit. We could have the same conversation on a lot of other issues. We have not had the people in our leadership that has demanded our fair share, and we need to.
All right. George?
I'm going to build on that. It's an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment that we didn't do our homework and we didn't get the money that we were allowed to have. And it's an even bigger embarrassment that we had to use our resources, our city resources, to fund this stuff. So I'm thinking we got to do a few things. One is audit our process. That's an important detail. We have to hold the people accountable and then get them trained if they aren't trained, because that's the biggest problem that I've always seen in the world. They always say, I didn't know any better, so let's fix that. And then we have to include a calculation for the increased immigration to increase funding. That has to be there, and if it's not there, this is just going to be a roundabout whole circle. All right, I got you 25 seconds.
You're giving us a little extra time there, George. I don't know what to do with it.
I'm efficient.
There you go.
Give it to me.
I think this might be a bit of a first here. All right, I want to direct our candidates, I want to direct the audience over to the screen here, candidates to the screen in front of you there. We do have a question. We talked about how important it is to hear from the community. This question comes from Sonia Rashid. Sonia lives in Meadowvale. Take a listen here.
Like many people in Mississauga, we immigrated here to make a new home. When we came, we knew that building a new life would be hard work, and we take that on every day. But there are also many barriers in the way that hard work won't fix. There is a terrible shortage of affordable housing. And my husband and I want to have a family, but there are a lot of wait lists for childcare. So what my biggest concern is, as mayor, what would you do to ensure that newcomers like us would have the best support and services we need to stay and thrive in Mississauga?
All right, Dipika, you've got your minute.
So, setting up new immigrants for success is absolutely fundamental for the progress of any city, and that includes Mississauga. So I embrace that challenge. It's a joint provincial, federal, and municipal responsibility. We all have our roles. And I do believe that we do a good job, and we can continue to do a better job. One of the things that I do want to talk about is the fact that housing. One thing that we really need to work on is affordable housing so that young families like the ones she spoke about can afford to buy a home, because that is the immigrant dream. And that's one of the reasons it is a really, really bad idea to think about a municipal land transfer tax, because what that will do is increase the cost of buying a house. It's going to make it harder to buy a house. It's going to make it harder to sell a house. So it's really important that as we go forward, we're very careful in the policy choices we make as a city to ensure our city is livable and affordable, and immigrants are set up for success.
Thank you, Dipika. Alvin, same question, of course, to you.
Thank you to Sonia. It's incredibly troubling to hear that story, because that's the same story my parents had, except life was more affordable back then. We need to be helping the newcomers who are coming here, immigrants who are coming to our country, and finding them a place to live and a place to belong. We also need to help the people who are here, seniors who want to downsize, growing families, but the newcomers and students who need to live near campus. We need to address all these issues comprehensively with a real housing plan that engages with builders and finds ways to get more building done faster. And I've experienced working with childcare. I was the vice president of the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare to get better childcare here in Ontario. And when I was leading the fight for parental leave, I got more parental leave from the federal government. And here in the city, I led the way on fourplexes with the federal government, working with them in the minister's office to ensure that we had $113 million in funding to build more affordable housing in this city, and I'm proud of that. And that's the type of movement that we need to keep going.
Alvin, thank you. Over to you, Stephen.
Well, we've been having this conversation for decades and decades and decades, and nothing's getting any better. When my grandfather first came over, he was looking for work, and he used to go on a rail car right across Canada for places that he could first find work and send money back home. And we're at a point right now where we should be learning from our past and moving forward. The type of leader that I am is I'm a connector of people. I like bringing people together. We have the most cosmopolitan city when it comes to having the entire globe right here under one roof here in Mississauga. This is our opportunity to really push forward, integrate and tie into Peel and also our upper levels of government to get some meaningful, welcoming change done and have housing of all types that's available, because this is really the opportunity to be doing this right this very moment, moving forward. It's not looking back, it's looking forward and getting it done. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. Brian, over to you.
I've got more bad news for you. We are in a per capita GDP recession right now. The only thing that means that we're not in a recession overall is because we're adding people. But if you actually did the analysis on per capita, we're in a recession. Number two, the housing business has slowed down to almost a complete stop. There's 28 months of condominium inventory right now. Almost every project is stopping. The projections are there's going to be 5,000 of people out of work in the construction business in the next couple of months. Excavators are not working at all. Youth unemployment is 17%. 50% of all the people that have to renew their mortgages are renewing them in the next 2 years at a 30 to 40% higher mortgage rate. What Sonia was talking about, you're going to be hearing a lot more about. We have got a jewel in Mississauga. We've got the second largest employment zone in all of Canada between Airport and Pill Hill. It is a high-tech, biotech, AI powerhouse.
Brian,
we don't promote it.
You there.
It's got to be the kernel that creates those high-paying jobs.
Your minute is up. I'm going to send it over to George. And George, a reminder, you do have a minute.
I'll take it. So let's talk about Newcomer support, because that was the question. This needs to be constantly reviewed. It can't be just a one-and-done document. It needs to be reviewed almost annually, because things change. As an example, we have refugees from a war-torn country, and the original idea was the war is only going to be about a year and a half. Not a chance. So all of our documentation, all of the calculations, they were all done with this perception that it was going to be a short time. But we've had 2 more issues throughout the world where we brought in more immigration. We haven't modified the document. We haven't looked at that. We haven't done anything to change that. And that needs to be changed immediately if we want to get anything better. Good? Got it? It's yours.
You still got 18 seconds.
I can hum.
Well, maybe we'll do that after the debate.
Thank you.
So we've talked about, of course, necessary services and supports for newcomers. But when we talk about services, I want to broaden out the question a bit more and go into transit and connectivity. We know that that is a huge issue for any city, like Mississauga, of course, that continues to grow. So the question here is to all of you. High quality, reliable, accessible, and affordable transit allows a city to grow without slowing down. Residents of Mississauga use many platforms to get around the city to access jobs and, of course, essential services and everything in between. Cars, bikes, public transit, e-scooters. Too often, transit policy is spoken about using buzzwords or high-level talking points. So please speak in concrete terms to the details of your plan to keep Mississauga moving with the full range of transportation options that are needed by residents. Dipika, over to you.
You know, it is folly to divorce land use planning from transit. But we are doing that, and I want to stop that. We are intensifying without building transit. That is wrong. We are removing car lanes without giving people more transit options. That is wrong. So I have put forward a practical proposal. The practical proposal is we don't take car lanes away without providing drivers with real transit alternatives. And the second is we need to have greater ambition when it comes to building out our transit. I've put forward a robust transit plan. It builds on ideas that are already there at Metrolinx and at the City of Mississauga, so it's not just sort of made up. I build on it, but we need to fast track that. No more 10 years to build an LRT. We really need to fast track that if we are going to have a livable city. So we need cars and transit and bike lanes and micromobility and all of those.
We're going to move on as we move on to this theme of transit here and moving. Thank you, Dipika. Alvin, over to you.
We need to fix a 40-year mistake. 40 years ago, the city of Mississauga was offered a subway extension from Kipling down into the core where we are right now. And we said no to that. We actually said no to it twice. So we need to find a way to undo that mistake and work with the government to find ways to fund more rapid transit across the city of Mississauga. But we need to have that connection. We need to upgrade the BRT along Dundas to an LRT so that you can have a one-bum ride from Toronto right here into the core where everybody is. And then we need to build a minimum viable network of bus rapid transit across the city of Mississauga, along the north on Derry, along the east along Dixie, along the west in Erin Mills and Winston Churchill, because we need a rapid connection for people to get around this city so that they can rely on a system that works for them, one that doesn't have to take 45 minutes in between buses. And then we need to build a minimum viable network for cycling and for multi-use trails so that people can safely get around this city. Once we do that, we will be that modern city.
Alvin, thank you. Okay, on transit, Stephen, over to you.
Well, if we're looking to take a lot more density, which we're being told that we have to do, and we're looking to become that next step of a city that we all want to be, we have to have world-class transit. And really what that is taking the light rapid rail that we have that's going up and down the Hazel-McCallion line. The downtown loop is certainly one, but that makes no sense as far as I'm concerned if you don't have your east-west fixed. A bus rapid transit that's going along Dundas, that should be used right now as a down payment for us to put in a subway from Kipling Station right along Dundas that goes to the light rapid transit at here, Ontario. That makes sense. And as well, for the density that we're going to be getting along Dundas right now, for every floor that goes above what they're allowed right now, to be able to take a levy that would go into sinking that into building that subway. It's the cut and cover approach, which is 50% cheaper than boring. It's realistic. This is the way of the future to be able to do things.
Thank you for your comments on that. Brian, over to you.
I'm currently chair of a GTA-wide civic advocacy organization called Transit Alliance. The most transformational thing that could happen in Mississauga is all-day, two-way go, frequent service on the Milton-Mississauga line. It's been talked about for 25 years, and it's got to come. BRTs, LRTs are between 50 and 500 capacity, depending on how many cars there are. GO trains are 5,000. That's the kind of service that we need. It's been talked about for 25 years. You've got to ask yourself, why did Vaughan get a subway extended to the Vaughan Metro Centre? Why did Richmond Hill get a subway extended to Steeles and then to Richmond Hill? Why did Markham get all-day two-way go to a downtown Markham? Because they had leaders that did a quid pro quo. We'll build density if you bring the transit. We've been talking about all-day two-way frequent GO train service, which would transform, because it would be a surface subway. I'd add a station at Cawthra and maybe another one. It would transform. And no one's going to take a subway from here, Ontario, to a job downtown. 25
Brian?
Stops, it's not going to happen. Go. That's the way to do it.
That is your time, Brian. George?
So I'd like you to jump online to tavaresformayor.ca and scroll down to where I explain my new system to use the existing transit system and the bus management system and combine them together. To create a virtual bus transit system, we'll use the transponders to gauge the timing, to get the timing of the buses on time properly. This works in China, Brazil, and a few other places. And at all of these locations, we'll have, all of the bus stops will have terminal. The terminal will tell you whether the bus is on time, whether the bus is late, whether the bus is at holiday services, or how full the bus is, so that you can identify whether you got to wait for the next bus, and then maybe think of some of the other alternative travels. I also have one that's a bike and bus for free initiative. So you take your bike to the bus stop, you get on the bus, you ride for free. This way we can get people to go further distances in Mississauga, and you can get the data to identify where you need bike lanes. You don't just put them where you think they might go, so you actually have great data. I have two more, but I'm running late.
There's your time. There's your time. Thank you. Okay, we go from connectivity now over to, we want to talk about the use of employment lands. This has been a big issue, of course, we know in the city of Mississauga. Once again, I want to draw your attention to the screen above the candidates over here. Candidates to the screen in front of you. This is a question coming from Anthony Petrucci with Palma Pasta. Let's take a listen here.
Hello, my name is Anthony Petrucci. I'm a lifelong resident of Mississauga and business owner. My question to all candidates: while there is a need to build more housing to address the housing crisis, there is also a need to preserve employment lands. Indeed, employment lands are crucial to the future economic growth of the city of Mississauga. What are your plans regarding employment lands?
All right, Dipika, over to you.
You know, as mayor, I will bring a judicious lens to this. I think there could be times where if employment lands are underused, maybe there's an opportunity. But I want to be very, very clear. We have to generally protect employment lands. That is crucial. And I'll tell you why. You know, if it's office space, you can coexist. You can have office at the bottom, you can have office 4 or 5 floors, and then you can have residential on top, especially if office usage is declining. Industry is a bit different. It can be noisy, it can be smelly, so it's not that easy to have land use compatibility. So if you're going to start rezoning employment lands willy-nilly, 2 things are going to happen. One is, the first thing is, as soon as you rezone it to housing, the value of the land shoots up. And when that happens, small business now cannot afford to rent or own in those employment lands. So we have to be very, very careful. Generally, I would want to protect employment lands.
There's your time. Alvin, same question over to you.
It's good seeing Anthony at Palma Pasta. I just bought my kids some there for dinner the other day, and it's amazing, so you should go check it out. But Anthony raises a really good point. because we absolutely need more housing. We need to make sure it's in the right places. So there are some opportunities for conversion. When you look at the Huron-Ontario corridor on the LRT, near the north end, there's a lot of industrial land, there's a lot of employment land there that's not really being used for that. There's an opportunity there. But in my neighborhood, around the Clarkson Village, there is important employment lands that we're going to save because we absolutely need that industry, which is leading in the world, around the country. And we need to secure that to make sure that they can continue leading the way on that research and development. But in and around, there's pockets where we have major transit station areas that we can convert and make sure that we are creating livable, walkable neighborhoods. This is the job of the city, is how do we find that balance to make sure that we are providing the jobs and the space for people to succeed in this city. And that's what we're going to do.
All right, Alvin, thank you for that. Stephen, over to you.
Currently, Mississauga is the second largest employer in the province of Ontario. This is something that we build on. We have zoning in place, and quite frankly, this is a competitive advantage that we have. We have the airport. Everybody calls it the Toronto Pearson Airport. We all know it's the Mississauga Pearson Airport. And on top of that, we have the 400 series highways. We have rail. We have a multicultural base here. We have skilled labor. We have all the ingredients right here for success. It's setting up that further stage for people to want to come here, and having a mayor that's going to go out and sell Mississauga to let everybody in the world know that this is the best place in the planet to do business. And if you want to do it, we'll say yes, and we'll figure out how to make it happen after. But this is the type of approach that we need to take. And right now, we've actually got an innovation corridor down towards the waterfront that is going to employ 9,000 people in science and technology jobs. These are the types of things that we need to forge forward on, and this is our opportunity right now to be able to do that.
Stephen, thank you for this. Brian?
This is outmoded thinking. I could show you a report that came out just today from a major property development company, brokerage, that says that the business of city development has changed dramatically. It used to be that employees had to locate where companies were. But now it's turned on its head because primarily millennials, the companies have to go where employees want to be. And employees want to be, particularly young people, in mixed-use, dynamic, vibrant, urban or semi-urban environments. Sheridan Research Park. You know what? The biggest failure there is you couldn't even put a coffee shop. You couldn't put a restaurant. It was zoned so rigorously that you had to only have office or industrial use. What you want is mixed-use developments. You know what most cities are doing right now? They're actually having seminars and conferences on how to turn office into residential. We should be allowing mixed-use development. That's what people want. They want to live, they want to work, they want to thrive in one area. And so this is outmoded thinking. But we do have an incredible secret in that airport corporate zone. It needs a connection to downtown Toronto. You can't have two employment zones that aren't connected by transit.
Thank you for that. And George?
So Ontario reduced the Red Tape Act, and one of them was to change the zoning. So this is coming. Wherever there's parking, wherever there's industry, that's fertile ground for development. So we know what's coming. So the real question is, what are we going to do to protect the businesses that are out there? Now, we already know that they're going to be removing the parking minimums in certain locations. I think this is an opportunity to make a little bit of headway here. And I think we should do some tax reform for the businesses that are in close proximity to the condos with limited parking. And this gives the smaller businesses an opportunity to have greater people to sell to, better opportunities, and it's going to be cheaper for them to maintain their businesses. Now, this is a short-term solution for a big problem that we're going to have, but we definitely need more. Definitely need more businesses in here with better income, because we can't afford to live in our city. And I find it very disconcerting that students are working here, living somewhere else. So we've got to fix that.
George, thank you for that. All right, that's sort of the first part of this debate. We're going to move over to the second part, in which candidates have an opportunity now, of course, to pose a question to each other. The way it's going to work, just to remind our candidates once again, as well as the audience here, the first candidate, it will be Dipika. We'll start with Dipika. We're going to continue in order as we have done so. We'll give 30 seconds to pose a question to an opposing candidate. That candidate will have 1 minute to respond. There will then be a 1 minute cross-examination, and then that candidate who was answering the question will have 30 seconds to close to respond to that. So I'm going to hand it over to Dipika, and away you go.
So Alvin, I know you've talked about introducing new taxes. So my question to you is, would you introduce the a new municipal land transfer tax?
Okay, Alvin, begin, and we've got a little extra, there we go. We'll start with our 1 minute now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dipika. No, absolutely not. I would not introduce a municipal land transfer tax, and I think we've both seen that Councillor Parrish has said that she is very interested in doing that, and has said so on a number of occasions over the last several years. We've been talking about how do we freeze taxes. I've been talking about how we freeze taxes, and I'm the only candidate talking about that because of how important I believe it is to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to help the people in this city live in a more affordable city. We can't control the price of gasoline. We can't control the price of groceries as a city. But this is the one tool that we have in our toolkit where we can actually help people save hundreds of dollars a year. And I'm proud to stand behind that because we can do it in a fair and equitable way. We can do it in a way that is responsible and that doesn't jeopardize our future investments. And that's what I'm planning on doing. But no, I do not plan on introducing a municipal land transfer tax. But how we can also pay for it would be to continue exploring, as we have been doing at the Region Appeal, a vacant homes tax, which allows us to expand the amount of housing in our city.
All right, now you've got a minute, Dipika, for a cross-examination.
So Alvin, I heard you say earlier that, at the Regional Appeal, we must do our part, we must fill the gap, the province is not funding us, so the Regional Appeal should step up. So are you still planning to freeze taxes at the Region of Appeal?
So the plan is that we're freezing taxes at the city of Mississauga, where we know that we can control and that the mayor would have the opportunity to put forward the budget. And that's my plan. For the city of Mississauga.
You're not freezing it at the region?
Not at the region. We're talking about city residential property taxes and then lowering them for businesses, small businesses in Mississauga by 15%. So that they can continue serving these great people of the city of Mississauga. We have 100,000 businesses and we need to support them. And we need to support the low-income seniors as well. These are programs that we have. These are the tools that we have available in our toolkit in order to help people save money and continue to live in the city.
You've got 30 seconds now for closing, Alvin.
I think what I heard was you're going to freeze taxes and increase services and give tax cuts as well. If you believe that, I've got some swampland for you. Thank you.
Okay, so, well, now, Alvin, I'm going to give you 20 seconds for a last response here.
Yeah, the plan is fully costed. It's been vetted by previous budget chiefs in the city of Toronto and in the province of Ontario. It's fully costed. It's available on our website. Check it out.
Okay, Alvin, I now give you the opportunity to ask another candidate a question.
So I'm going to take this approach because I think this is really important. And I'm going to talk directly to the camera because this candidate isn't here. But Carolyn Parrish, I believe, owes the people of Mississauga an explanation. This job of mayor is not one you can do in retirement on the side of your desk. This is incredibly important. We have 800,000 people here who deserve to know what your plans are, who deserve to be able to ask you questions. And an absentee candidate and an absentee mayor is completely unacceptable for our city.
Do you have a question for any of the candidates here? Ms. Parrish, as we know, cannot respond to that question. She was invited to the debate, unfortunately was not able to attend and declined. But with the time we have right now.
I'll cede my time, yeah.
All right. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And, I always like to do things a little bit differently, but unfortunately I can't at this particular case because as I've mentioned before, this is our most important election we have. We need a mayor that's going to go out there and represent every single person in the city of Mississauga that's living here and also that wants to live here and that wants to set up a business here. But the only way that you can do it is if you show up. And again, I'll say the same thing is Carolyn Parrish. Honestly, where are you? We want to see a leader that is in the city of Mississauga, that's going to build communities, that's going to represent communities. And you can only do that by showing up and being out visible in the community. I have a track record of doing that as a ward councillor right now. I'm out each and every day and night to make sure that our local businesses are represented, our charities are represented. So I ask, where and when will we see Carolyn Parrish coming forward to be the mayor that she says that she wants to be, because we don't see that right now, and I think the city deserves better. And I know I should be asking that with somebody else, but I'll
okay, so
take the
this is
rest of my
fair.
time.
This is
Thank
fair
you.
where you know, candidates given the opportunity to pose the questions that they want to go to. However, we do have this time allotted, and I'm going to present it to you again, Stephen, as well. Alvin, you've chose to push over your time, but I'm going to, is there a candidate here that you would like to ask a question to, keeping in mind we do have an audience, not just live, but televised and online as well, that perhaps is looking for a little bit more rather than the push to a candidate who's not here, who can't respond?
No, I'll concede my time at this point. Thank you.
Brian, then over to you.
I'd ask Councillor Damerla, who has on numerous occasions bragged about her executive experience as Minister of Long-Term Care. I think the biggest tragedy during COVID was long-term care. I interviewed on my nightly radio show numerous different people that said, after SARS, we actually did judicial inquiries about what went wrong in SARS, and we came up with a whole program for what had to change. And they said repeatedly, every single person, conservative and liberal, that was in charge of long-term care should get fired because we didn't do the job we should have done. Long-term care was a tragedy.
Brian, I'm just going to, what is the question to Councillor Damerla?
Do you think you did a good job as Minister of Long-Term Care when you created such a tragedy?
You know, one of the most, I want to say one of the most, the privilege that I had of serving as both Minister of Seniors and the Associate Minister responsible for long-term care is an absolute privilege that I still treasure. And I want to say I'm very proud of my record. When I became the Associate Minister responsible for long-term care, what I found out was that although on the books, mandatory inspections were on the books, they were not being done. And I made that happen. I brought it forward and I said, this is not acceptable, it's on the books, and we have to start the mandatory inspections. We hired hundreds of new inspectors and we started that. The second thing I did was I increased funding. Unfortunately, the government that succeeded ours stopped the mandatory inspections, and we know what happened. So yes, I am proud of my record.
All right, we'll have a cross-examination. Brian, over to you, directed at Councillor Damerla.
You were a provincial MPP, then you lost and you became a ward councillor, then you didn't resign, but you ran provincially again, and then you didn't win, so you came back to be a provincial councillor, and now you're a municipal councillor and you didn't resign, but you're running for mayor. Are you going to run provincially again in the next election?
No.
Is your commitment to Mississauga?
My commitment has always been to Mississauga, whether I've run as a member of provincial parliament, whether I've served in cabinet, whether I've been a city councillor, whether I'm running here as mayor. You know, Mississauga is the city that I love, and I always like to say, when I came to Canada, I came here with big dreams and no plan, but an unshakable faith that this country would give me opportunity, and it did. And I'm forever grateful to the city of Mississauga because it allowed me to raise my daughter and build a better life for myself and my family. I'm loyal to the city, and I make no apologies for being an MPP and a councillor.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Brian, if you want to pose another question here, if you have more to say.
No, I just think that we have to think about who we want to lead a city that is $1 billion enterprise, 5,000 people. And, you know, I think one of the best prime ministers we had was Brian Mulroney, who came in from the outside. One of the best ministers of finance was Paul Martin, who came in from the outside. Hazel McCallion was a business person until she was 55. With all due respect to these people, they're nice people, I don't think they have the business experience, and I don't think they've proven it in their last terms on councils. And one of the ones who's not here, in her 40 years in political life, 25 years on council, that they can actually do the job that we need done in this almost desperate situation where I think it's potentially going to get worse.
All right, thank you. George, over to you. And which candidate would you like to pose a question to?
Well, originally I wanted to ask Mitch McEachran, but he's not here, so I'm going to ask Brian Crombie. Brian, do you think our city would benefit from a new mayor who isn't on the council, and why?
That's like one of my questions. Over to you, Brian.
I do. I think we've got to have a serious conversation about the lack of democracy that we've got and the lack of voter participation. And so I'm going to present to you an idea. I think that we've had this distraction for the last 2 years about this separation of Mississauga from Peel. And once we did the economic analysis, I think everyone came to the conclusion that it made no sense. I think what would be really interesting, I wouldn't want to decide, I'd want the people to decide, but I think it'd be interesting to actually study whether amalgamation makes sense. Because I happen to believe 25 years ago, there were 800 cities in Ontario. Today, there's 400. There's been a 50% reduction in cities. In 1996, the GTA Task Force recommended the amalgamation of Peel, the amalgamation of Halton, the amalgamation of York, the amalgamation of Durham, and 5 cities together forming a new GTA, because they said we're going to be a $10 million metropolis, and we've got to start thinking like a $10 million metropolis rather than all these little tiny things. So I'd like to have a referendum in 2 years. I'd like to have economic analyses done. Does separation make sense? Or does amalgamation make sense, or do you want to stay the same? And I tell you, if you actually had the economic analyses done,
George,
and you had all these people
jump in here
you would have the best turnout we've ever had.
So to get back to that amalgamation, it was actually one of the options when they were talking about it in 2019, Ernst & Young documentation. We had 3 options. It was separation, as is, and amalgamation. So I can send you the document. It's got some really good information in there. I think you'd really enjoy it. But my follow-up question, of course, I'm going to give you one. So what are you going to say to people that say only city members, city council members have the motive, the opportunity, the abilities, and the work ethic? They're the only ones that can run for mayor. What would you say?
Well, regrettably, that's what CBC is saying. CBC is saying exactly that in regards to their criteria for tomorrow night and who's going to have in the debate. Only city councillors are going to be invited to the debate tomorrow. And I'm going to say that's the problem. That's why people don't get involved. That's why we've got a 21% turnout. You have a referendum on fourplexes. You have a referendum in 2 years on should we amalgamate or should we separate or should we stay the same. You would have the best turnout. You know what? The 1988 free trade election, we had one of the best turnouts we've ever had. Why? Because Brian Mulroney and John Turner talked about something that was really critically important to all of us. And we all got interested in it.
You both have 30 seconds.
Put something forward to the people and let the people decide for once.
Just so everybody knows, I also did not get the CBC invite for the debate, just so you know. But thank you.
All right.
No further questions.
We have about 4 minutes left in this section, and I'm kind of going to go a little bit off script here to give our candidates an opportunity to remind them as well that this is the one of 2 debates that are left until you, the voters, head to the polls perhaps this weekend. If not, then several days from now on Election Day. So I'm going to open it up one more time again to all of you, all 5 of you. Is there a candidate that you have a question to in which you want to engage in some cross-examination? Dipika?
Well, I have a question for Brian.
Uh-oh.
So Brian, you say you're a land developer. Don't you think there's a conflict of interest running for mayor when you're in the development business?
No, because I think that if I got elected, I would have to give up my job. Unlike you guys who keep your jobs while you're running, I'd have to give up my job. So I happen to believe that someone in business that understands what the problems are could actually, have an interesting point of view and could actually move the debate forward. In one of the debates that I was invited to, I was uninvited to 5, I was invited to 4, so, it's getting there. Is 2 of you talked about a subway to Dixie, and you started bragging about how that might be something you could have happen. Why did Vaughan get a subway? They got 50-story towers. Why is Steeles getting a subway? They've got 50 towers, Toronto's got 50-story towers. Vaughan's competing with 60-story towers. Downtown Markham's got 50. Do you know what your council has as the limit at Dixie? 12 and 25. You know what you're not going to get, ever, is a subway to Dixie when they are 12 and 25, when Vaughan is 50, when Richmond Hill is 50 and 60, every other mayor in every other city is getting on the game here. They understand what's happening.
Feel free to jump in. You've got a minute
and transit nodes, and you're going to get 12 stories. Nothing's going to happen at Dixie. I'm sorry.
Brian, you need to do your homework. The first thing is, you've said that I don't have private sector experience. I worked in corporate banking. I have an MBA from the University of Toronto, Rotman School of Management. So you're way off base when you think you're the only one with private sector experience. We also know that you've been banned for life from being a director on in any publicly held company here in Canada. So I think, you need to be fair. You've been pushing us and saying you've got experience and we don't. We all have pluses and minuses. Let's just respect each other on that.
What you just
Ryan,
said,
you got 30 seconds to answer here.
what you just said is a lie. I have not been banned for life. I settled and agreed that for 8 years I would not. And I settled. And my boss, who was a co-accused, fought against the government and won. And the error that you're talking about, the OSC said was not material and we did not break a law. And people like you that say that I did anything illegal, that say that I was banned, that said that I was criminal, which one of you actually has said on several occasions, are lying. I settled. I agreed because of the benefit. No one wins against the OSC except a billionaire.
Ryan?
A billionaire fought, and he won, saying nothing
Ryan,
material
thank you for
and no
this.
laws were broken.
Ryan, your time is up. We have about a minute and a half, or about 2 minutes left in this. Alvin, you're putting your hand up here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Angie. And I know we've had some lively debates, and we're not always going to agree on everything, and that's okay. And so, Councillor Damerla, I know we've sparred a little bit around the idea around freezing taxes, which in my mind is the best tool that we have in our toolkit in order to help people in terms of not raising their costs of living in the city. So I want to give you the chance because, I'm trying to freeze them and help people as much as possible. What is your plan, and why do you believe that raising taxes is important?
My plan's very simple. I'm going to keep property taxes at or below the rate of inflation. And the reason I say that is 70% of a municipality's expenses are wages. Wages have to keep up with inflation. We have unions. We need to negotiate with them. How are you going to pay for those increases if you're going to freeze taxes? Only one way. You got to cut services or raid reserves or any number of combinations, but sooner or later it comes back to haunt you. So what I'm saying is a responsible commitment. Yes, there's an affordability crisis, but the city has its obligations. So I'm going to keep property taxes to at or below the rate of inflation. My question to you is, why are you picking and choosing? Why do you think it's okay to freeze taxes at the city of Mississauga, but not at the region of Peel?
I'm going to give Alvin 30 seconds here, and then we're going to move on. Alvin?
Absolutely. We need to find more ways to get more savings at the Region of Peel, but we don't control the Region of Peel as a council in Mississauga, so that's why we're focused on Mississauga. We're going to find some savings to do through the downloading of services that we're getting. But the rate of inflation was 6.8% 2 years ago. So I know you think that's important and you need to raise taxes in order to pay for those things. I disagree, respectfully, and I think the voters will have a choice in terms of what they want to do with that.
All right. Candidates, thank you very much.
Do I have time?
I can give you like 15 seconds.
Well, the rate of inflation now is under 3%, so let's just be real here.
Okay, candidates, thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on now to the last portion of this debate, a combination of questions from me, and we will have a video question as well. The first part here, we're talking about, the theme is affordable housing. We know we've already touched on that from all of the candidates. Here's your question. Now, we've spoken about the city's rapid growth. That has been very clear, with significant new development projects that are underway. We're seeing it, all the high rises that are going up. How will you ensure that this growth is inclusive, providing affordable housing options, and preventing the displacement of long-term residents due to gentrification? Adding to this, I'd like you to please tell us how you intend to work with other levels of government to grow the full spectrum of housing needed in the city, particularly affordable housing and deeply affordable housing. And secondly, what will you do as mayor within your own mandate to be moving this issue forward? Dipika.
So as mayor, one of the first things that I will do is waive development charges for purpose-built rentals, because that's the one area that we absolutely critically need developers to start building, and no one is building. We need rental. So that's what I'm going to do. By removing the development charges, you take a chunk of the cost out, because what developers are saying is that the cost of construction is here and people's ability to buy is here. And as a result, by giving this relief on development charges, I'm hoping to incent the construction of rental buildings. For deeply affordable housing or social housing, I think as mayor, the cities do have a role to play. It needs to be a partnership. The federal government needs to be at the table. But as a city, the one thing we can do is find surplus land. And that is something I'm going to commit to doing. I'm just going to very quickly share an example of a missed opportunity. We're building a fire station. We should have been building affordable housing on top of it. The region and the city didn't talk, so it didn't happen. As mayor, my commitment is something like that will never, ever happen again in Mississauga.
Dipika, thank you very much for that. Alvin, over to you.
Thank you, Angie. You know, I respect Councillor Damerla's plan, but it is 3 bullet points on our website. I have a real plan, this 10-page plan that you can look up right now, alvintedjo.ca/housing, that's been supported and endorsed by Jennifer Keesmaat, who said this is the most comprehensive and detail-specific plan that she has ever seen in municipal government in terms of how we're actually going to build. How are you going to find more pathways to get affordable housing done? How are we going to build more supportive housing? Don't take my word for it, take hers. Take hers and every other developer and every other consultant that talked about how we are going to build, and the advocates that have been talking about how we are going to get these spaces built in our city. And I'm incredibly proud of that plan. But to me, this is the first step. The first step in terms of how we change the culture in our city that will allow more density along transit lines, that allows more missing middle and density in existing neighborhoods to ensure that everyone has got the chance to find a place in this city. Because we need more housing of every kind. Thank you.
Alvin, thank you very much for that. Stephen, same question to you.
Well, thank you, Angie. And this is something that I live every day. I've got over 40% of all the development down in my particular ward for the whole city right now. And also, I read my reports. For example, if we're going through to build a fire hall, I make sure I go through it with our fire department. And at the time that they're planning it, that if you want to put housing on it, that's your time to do it, not when they start sticking a shovel in the ground. And you know, what we need to focus on right now is actually building that rental housing. This is where we start because that's where the need is the greatest right now. Do we also work on our development charges? We sure do, but at the same time, the cities can't do it on their own because we're the lowest, and we're the lowest part with the ability to raise funds to be able to get that job done. But right now, you need to have a use it or lose it approach, and how that happens, it's not by beating up on a developer, it's working with them and other levels of government to saying, you want the houses? We have 80,000 approved units right now. How do we get those shovels in the ground right away? And this is what we need to do because the clock is ticking. And it's not just for an election time, it's all the time. We need to get the job done. And that's what I do. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. Brian?
Use it or lose it regulations are a disaster. Developers need to sell 50 to 70% or have a pro forma that they can show a banker that they're going to have an absorption if it's a rental property. And the use it or lose it they've had in BC, they're going to get rid of it because what they found is that developers were out there, were selling 40%. And they had a month to go before they got finished and they got their approvals yanked and they had to start from scratch again. No amount of bullying from city councillors with use it or lose it is going to get a developer to go out and put $100 million of equity on the table to build something. What would happen is a reduction in development fees for condos below a certain figure, call it 400 or 500, or purpose-built rental. I think that is actually a good idea. Increasing the density. Every architect I've talked to says that people don't recognize density about 6 stories. They don't know whether it's 6 or 8 or 10. So I would immediately give people 20 to 30% increase in density around transit nodes if half of it was affordable. And you give that kind of an incentive to someone that's already got the number of condos sold or the rental, and you give them the more density, you take away the development fees. 30%
your time is up.
of homes
Thank you for
are
this.
taxes.
Thank you for this, Brian. Thank you. George?
I like the term deeply affordable. I think that was the most important comment out of the entire thing. So I think if you go on my website, tavaresformayor.ca, I've got a couple of ideas in there. I can't do it justice. I just can't. But I came up with a different thing. We need to create a better classification of housing. We need to have, because in my day we had some sort of graduate housing. You started off with a basement apartment, then you graduated to a top, and then you've saved up enough money, and there was enough money at the end of the month to save. And today we have more money. We have less money at the end of the month than we have ever had before. So I came up with this idea that maybe we could come up with some graduate housing. So you have low income, high density, and then you can graduate into something bigger. And this is a social program that I think we need to create, or at least come up with a better idea of what, because our current system sucks. It's not a very good system. So I also think in order to create better development for purpose-built rentals, we have to do things like cut the fees, permit fees, with incentives to finish easier, quicker, faster, and get the shovels in the ground. And we should create better incentives for the next.
George?
Yes?
Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I want to come back to newcomers. That is a really important element, of course, as we know, in the buildup of Mississauga, matching newcomer skills and labor market needs. This next question, of course, is to our candidates. So newcomers to Mississauga support our local economy and contribute to our community's diversity. As we heard earlier, they face many challenges related to the cost of living, housing, and income security, as well as information and orientation needs for themselves, as well as for their family members. Employment is an important area of interest for both employers as well as for these newcomers, particularly matching skills with labor market needs. As mayor, what is your plan to help connect and match newcomers' skills, previous training, and experience with employment needs? Dipika.
So, we had Anthony Petrucci ask a question. I had a really great conversation with him, and he said that when his dad came here, came from Italy, he started this restaurant business, which we all know, Palma Pasta, and he said that, his dad was very successful. He didn't speak English. English was a second language, but he was able to start the business. And he said to me, he doesn't think that if his dad, fast forward, was to immigrate now and didn't speak English, he just doesn't think he would be able to open a business as easily because we have created so many hoops. So, that story really, really resonated with me. Think about that. So as mayor, one of my commitments is to make it easier for entrepreneurs, no matter where they're from, every entrepreneur, just make it easier for them to start business in Mississauga. That's the best thing we can do to support. I've been a small business owner, and I can tell you the biggest job generator is small business. So that would be my commitment to make sure that immigrants can start a business easily.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Dipika. Alvin?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question because my dad immigrated from Indonesia, and he had a dental degree back home. And he came here 45 years ago, and they didn't recognize it. Not 1 year, not one credit, not one course. And made me think, would I do that same thing? Would I make that same sacrifice? And so many, thousands and thousands of newcomers have the same issue. They've got PhDs, they've got doctoral degrees, they're working, driving Ubers. We need to find a better way. We need to find a better way. And I think we're exactly in the place we need to be. Sheridan College has done some amazing things to support newcomers, to find programs to transition their existing skills to what we need in the Canadian labor market. And so we need to continue partnering with post-secondary institutions, we need to continue partnering with the professional colleges, and we need to demand that we find ways to accelerate the recognition of these skills so that we can get the skilled labor that we absolutely need today.
Alvin, thank you very much for that. Stephen?
Yeah. Well, first of all, looking after everybody is, I think, incumbent upon what we're supposed to do as leaders and also as representing people. And right now, we have two different issues. We have people that are right on the margins that are, quite frankly, living out on the streets. And at the same time, we also have a refugee issue. Both are coming into the same intake in a lot of cases. And this is where having those partnerships with the federal government and also the provincial government, it makes a big, big difference when you can work to get some truly good funding arrangements solved. On the refugee side, that's of course on the federal end of things, to make sure that people are looked after. And again, that's working collaboratively. It's not trying to shame anybody or anything like that. We have an issue that's going on right now. People are hurting and suffering right now. Well, we need to make sure that not only are they looked after, but they have that lifeline, and then they plug into a network to know that they've got a place that they can call home in Mississauga with opportunity. And that's the other one where that we set the landscape for opportunity ahead for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for this, Stephen. Brian, over to you.
I'm a firm believer that the best social program is a great high-paying job. We have got a jewel in Mississauga that we have not promoted, we haven't incubated, we haven't developed that we need to. The airport corporate zone from Pearson to Pill Hill is the second largest employment zone in all of Canada. It's bigger than Vancouver, it's bigger than Montreal. The only one that's bigger is downtown Toronto. If this was in Kitchener-Waterloo, we'd have federal government funding a supercluster. If it was in Atlantic Canada, a supercluster. Vancouver, a supercluster. For some reason, Mississauga doesn't count. The Neptus Foundation did a big report that said every city in the world that has 2 clusters has to have a transit connection. They talked about La Défense and Champs-Élysées. They talked about Manhattan, New Jersey. Do you know how long it takes to get from Meadowvale to downtown Toronto if you're invited to a lunch at the Board of Trade? Over an hour. You're not going to do it. We have not developed, promoted, incubated. I'm doing my doctorate in business right now on economic development in clusters. We've got to treat it like the jewel that it is and promote it. And you go there, you know what? It's the United Nations for people working in laboratories and IT and high tech, and it's the leading aeronautics place. But we don't promote it the way that we could and should.
Brian, thank you very much for that.
So I think we're missing an opportunity. Yep. So I think we're missing an opportunity, especially in the schools like this, where we can create curriculums that will match skill for skill to fast track everybody to be able to get the degrees and the recognizable diplomas and the recognizable skill set, because that's a really important detail. Because there's nothing better than coming home from a hard day's work and you know what you're doing and you're making a good income, which is really important. I also think we need to develop an entrepreneurship idea to create, so when people come over, they can create newer jobs or maybe work from home, some other ideas that maybe they didn't have available at their, in the country that they left. So that's another opportunity that I think we need to do. I also believe that we're missing out on a city-sponsored app for employment to like-for-like skill set. I think that's an important one for specifically for immigrants or people that were having some difficulties finding jobs, because language is a huge barrier that we can recognize, and I think we need to find a way to overcome that, and I think with the app we'd be able to do something like that.
George. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to our next question here. This is going to be our last video question. We've talked about the importance of voters. We've talked to the importance about engaging youth. So what better than to hear from one of our youth? This one is a student from Sheridan College, Felipe da Silva. If I could have the candidates direct their attention to the screen in front. Ladies and gentlemen, to the screen up ahead. Let's take a listen.
Greetings, mayoral candidates. My name is Felipe da Silva. This is a great city, and I'm proud to call it home. But many students in the city are struggling with growing unaffordability, lack of transit option, and soaring rents. So as I think about my future after graduation, I am worried that I will not be able to afford a place of my own in Mississauga, and whether I'll be able to stay here, build my career, and live out on my own. So I want to know, if you are elected as the next mayor of Mississauga, how are you going to address this affordability challenge and ensure that my generation will be able to stay here to live, work, and contribute to this great city for years to come?
All right. Dipika.
So this is a story that really resonates with me because a very close family member, they've been trying to buy a house for 4 years now, and I've seen them put in bid after bid and not be able to buy. And in these 4 years, they've been able to get married. They just had a baby girl in March, but they're still living with dad. That's because they can't afford a house. And they've got 2 well-paying jobs. So this is priority number 1. You know, one of my commitments is I want Mississauga to be that city where young people can once again afford to buy a home, because what's a city without young people? And so my housing plan, you know, I have a number of things to remove the cost, including, as I said, I want to waive development charges, approve modular construction. I have a plan to speed up approvals at the city of Mississauga. But the one thing we must not do is bring in new taxes, like the municipal land transfer tax, because that'll just add thousands and thousands of dollars.
Dipika.
Cost of a house.
Thank you. Alvin.
Felipe is right. This is one of the most unaffordable cities to live in Canada. We have one of the highest municipal tax rates in the GTA, and it's getting worse before it's getting better. And so we need to do much more. We need to change course in terms of what we're doing here at the city of Mississauga, in terms of how we approach and approve housing. How do we approach and approve more transit projects? LRTs are great. But LRT, we were in the government, I was in the government 12 years ago when we approved the LRT and announced it, and it's still not done yet. The Eglinton Crosstown's taking forever. And so bus rapid transit gets us there in years, not decades. Approving affordable housing and tying that affordable housing to those approvals along major transit lines is how we build more housing. Otherwise, we're going to lose Felipe. We're going to lose him and so many others that we've continued to lose already, where we're missing a generation of people who are now moving to Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, anywhere else they can afford a place to live, and that's going to affect our success as a city.
Alvin, thank you. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, well, Felipe, I think a lot of what happens is you come in, you get your education, and you think you're off to a good start, and then at the end of it all, you're abandoned. Nobody's there to mentor you. Nobody's there to take you in and say, how can we get things done? First of all, we have to look at building more affordable rental units to start giving people a place that they can get a foothold in the marketplace as well, like Felipe that's coming out of school. And also, somebody that's going to be there to help mentor and bring somebody along in the system as well, and provide more opportunities for employment. And that's really what we're talking about now, is what are those opportunities? You can't just be there saying we're going to do these things and not deliver. We have to deliver. This is a time to do it. And we have great opportunities right now. Here up at City Centre, we have a community investment program in place that we need to take better advantage of. And also down on the waterfront, we have another one for that innovation corridor I had mentioned earlier, for another 9,000 jobs. These are things that we need to do to give people hope, to let them know that young people, this is your home as much as anybody else, and your opportunities are, the sky's the limit.
Thank you for that. Brian?
We need to take a really serious look at ourselves. 17% youth unemployment, highest public debt in history, highest debt per capita, highest private debt, most unaffordable housing, high taxes, twice what you get in Toronto, transit that we're not doing. We've not done a good job. And think about these guys. Not only do they have all that, but then they've got people telling them that AI is going to take away their jobs. You know what? It's going to be pretty tough. What do we got to do? 3 things. Number 1, we got to have a dramatic, not a small, but a dramatic increase in housing. And that's only going to come at scale, in density, at transit nodes, with height. You may not like it, but it's got to come with height. We're not going to do it with a basement apartment here and there. Number 2, it's going to be a dramatic improvement in transit. We've got to get people back and forth to where they're going to be working and living and enjoying life. And number 3, and most importantly, it's high-paying, good jobs. We've got to take that airport corporate center and the other industries, and we've got to cradle it like it's the jewel that it is, and we've got to demand the money from the federal government for a super cluster and the provincial government. We've got to develop those great jobs so that all those people can go to those jobs and pay their mortgages.
Thank you, Brian. Your time is up. George.
So working on his comments, which were great, deeply affordable accommodations, we talked about that briefly. We only touched upon it. We need more. We definitely need more, and I do believe that the graduate housing idea has some options, has some merit. I also believe that we need to change the first-time home buyers program. I think we need to have a specific one for student first-time home buyers, for students specifically, because I know that they're the ones that are going to hurt the most, and if we want to keep them in our city, we need to keep them. Another thing we have to have is a curriculum that's based for the industry inside of the city of Mississauga. I know Conestoga College had changed a lot of their curriculum to make sure that it matched, like for like, the technology bases around there, so that when students graduated, they had a job less than a kilometer away from the school, which I think is really important, and we should look at that as an opportunity. The other thing that we need to do as council is we need to hold the property tax at a reasonable level. That's important. We need to get back the money that was owed to us, as the Metamorphosis Group had pointed out that we lost out on. We need to readjust why we're losing that kind of money, and we have to look a little further ahead where we're going to lose money. Things like the LRT cost overruns, which will eventually cost us money. We know that the government said we're putting in an LRT. They also said that they were going to pay for it, but then they pulled back and said the cost overruns are going to be on our shoulders, and unless we get that in writing, which I'm asking everybody to do, regardless of if I win or lose, to put that in writing that the Ontario government will pay for it so we don't have to do the cost overruns.
George.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And before I get to our last theme, our last sort of main question here, I want to have a little bit of fun with our candidates there, if they will allow me to do so. We've got a couple of extra minutes here.
I'm wrestling.
I'm going to ask each of you a question here, just a one-word answer, a yes or no. And first couple of questions here. Dipika, the first question here to you. Is there a scenario in which you would use the strong mayor power to pass a bylaw with less than a majority of city council support? Yes or no?
No.
Alvin?
Yes.
Stephen?
No.
Brian?
Referendum.
George?
No.
Okay. Next question. Car, bike, walk, transit. In one word, how do you personally most often travel to work? Deepika.
Car.
Alvin.
Car.
Stephen.
Car.
Brian.
Car.
George.
Car.
All right. And finally, this last question here. Listen intently here. This one's a good one. Sum up what you would love about Mississauga in 6 words or less.
It's diversity. The world lives here, and it's so green, and it's so livable.
Alvin.
Great place to raise kids.
Stephen.
Diversity, opportunity, incredible people, and really a bright future.
That's more than 6 words, Stephen, but I'll let you hold on to that. Brian.
Waterfront, parks, great business opportunities, and wonderful friends.
And finally, George.
A parade for the Toronto Maple Leafs down along Dundas Street after winning the Stanley Cup.
I think anyone who can guarantee the Leafs are going to win is certainly going to get a vote here. All right. Our last question here, the theme being planning for a Mississauga for the future of everyone. Here is your question. This last 1-minute answer here is an opportunity for all of our candidates to now impress upon our viewers here at home, online, to the voters, who you are as leader and how you intend to shape the future of our city. So as we look to the next 50 years, the city is grappling with a critical question. What is the vision of a Mississauga we want to share with Ontario, Canada, and the world? How does City Hall meet the moment and make sure that the next version of our city is a Mississauga for everyone?
You know, as we look at the next 50 years, this is a pivotal election. And you have a clear choice in this race between Carolyn Parrish and me. And we couldn't be more different. I will build an inclusive Mississauga. I said this earlier, and I'm going to say this again. You know, when I moved to Canada, I really came here with big dreams and really no plan, but this unshakable belief that this country would come through for me. And I want that for everybody, for all the young people here, for my daughter, and for your children. And so what I want to build is a Mississauga brimming with opportunity for people to get ahead, because I believe that the best cities, the greatest cities, are not the ones with the tallest buildings or the best museums. They're cities where ordinary people believe that they can work hard and build a better life for themselves and their children. And that's my aspiration for Mississauga. That's why I'm running to be mayor. On June 10th, I ask for your
Dipika,
support.
thank you for this. Alvin.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you everyone for coming out today, because this is an incredibly important election where we have an opportunity to change the direction of the future of our city. We are talking about building the future. We're talking about families who are living in the city who can't afford to stay in the city right now, about seniors who need to leave because they can't afford the property taxes, for families that can't find the space to grow. We're losing jobs, we're losing those people, but we have hope, because I'm ambitious for our city. Because I love this city. I want to do everything we can to make sure that our seniors can continue to live in this community, to make sure that my kids have a place to live, to make sure that we make this the most affordable, the most livable, the most walkable community that we've seen in Canada. We can do that. We deserve that. We deserve these good things for our community because it's ours. And I've lived here my entire life, and I want to see that for you, and I want to see that for all of us. So take that vote to heart and understand the choice that you're going to make on June 10th, and I ask for it. Thank you so much.
Alvin, thank you. Stephen.
I want a city with a world-class waterfront, a world-class downtown. These are right within our grasp right now. Same thing when we have our transit. This is what we're really looking to do to move forward, to have a city that's fiscally responsible and that's sustainable, and that's going to have more opportunities for everybody, and to have arts and culture that we really get ourselves put on the world map. This is an opportunity to be an inclusive city and to one that really forge our future together and go forward. We're not living as a bedroom community anymore. We're becoming more of a cosmopolitan city, an inclusive city, and one that's got an identity around the world. Here is our opportunity to do it. This is what June 10th is coming into. It's our next chapter of who we are as a city of Mississauga. And I ask on June 10th that you vote for me, Stephen Dasko, to be our next mayor of Mississauga, to lead us all forward together. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. Brian.
I have news for Councillor Damerla. The election campaign is not over yet. There's still 2 weeks to go. I've only heard this comment once before. That was 2011. Michael Ignatieff said it's between me and Stephen Harper. And you know what happened? He went down to the biggest defeat the Liberal Party has ever suffered. And Jack Layton jumped on top and formed the official opposition. So, you know, beware. In 2010, 2 weeks before Election Day, Nenshi, I think one of the most transformational mayors in Canadian history, was at 8% in the polls. Two weeks later, he won. And the existing councillors that said, you're not invited to debates, you're not allowed to come, actually went down to defeat. He was in third place at 8%, and he won 2 weeks later. I got to tell you, in September of 2014, the candidates for mayor were neck and neck. And Mayor Hazen McCallion heard that there was a debate that was, she thought, undemocratic. She got upset. She flew back from Brazil. She called me 3 times on the Friday. That Friday night, she was so incensed that it was undemocratic that she went and endorsed one candidate, and that candidate won by 30%.
Brian,
if someone stands up for democracy,
Brian, your
things
time
can
is
change.
up.
Carolyn Parrish
Brian,
not showing up is wrong, and Dipika saying that she is the only
Brian,
candidate
your time
that
is
can win
up.
is wrong.
The podium is now with George.
All right, so for the next 50 years, I think Mississauga will be in a position where we'll have great transit. It'll be on time, fast, with great technology to keep going. I think we're going to have less traffic, better options, for whether you want to bike, walk, drive, micromobility, whatever you like. There will be environmental sustainability with dog parks, permeable driveways, more parks, more green space. And the most important thing that we'll have is we'll have hope. We'll have hope, but that comes to this moment right here, where who we are going to challenge. The next 50 years of Mississauga will be determined by the mayor. The mayor that we are going to determine is one of us. No, there's 20 more. Sorry, there's 20 in total. And we haven't got a chance to actually hear all of them. So please, go to MississaugaVotes.ca, double check everyone that's there. It might not be your same ideology. It might not be your same ideas. You might not even agree with all of them, but they have a right to be heard. So at the very least, spend the time. Double check everybody.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
For that.
I have to keep to time here. Thank you. And of course, thank you to all of the candidates. I want to thank the organizers, the host organizers as well. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this does bring this to the end of our debate. It has been quite an engaging evening. And again, thank you all candidates for coming out and giving us your views and your opinions. So thank the audience as well. Remember, June 10th is voting day. Advanced polls are open once again this weekend. Thank you all for joining us here. We want to thank our audience, both the televised audience as well as those online as well. Ladies and gentlemen, have yourself a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you, Angie.